I'm Nancy Pfister, a third grade teacher at Rebo Steck Elementary School in Aurora, Illinois.
Great, cool. All right, so now eyes on me. We're trying to make contact here. Starting off, we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. First question, how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge?
Well, this unit connects to the skills of prior knowledge because in second grade they learn how to do an array by adding the array. And when they come to third grade, I take that array that they've learned with adding and I use that to help them learn how to do the array using multiplication. And this lesson that I did today, which was OA5, teaching them one strategy, which was distributive property, this will help them with all of the OA standards in third grade, which there are many, and it is something that children need to know how to multiply and divide fluently by the end of third grade.
Great. Next part of the question, what was taught before this lesson and what will come after it?
What was taught before this lesson was the understanding of an array, and also I had covered the commutative property so that they could get a strong foundation of one way to do an array is to understand that the commutative property is just a 3 by 4 is a 4 by 3. And after I felt like they had that strategy they knew well, and we continued working on multiplication and some division, I thought now we were ready to do the distributive property. And after we work on the distributive property for a while, I'll then feel comfortable to move in the associative property. So hopefully by January, all of the children will have the 3 properties that will help them with multiplication and division and have a strong understanding by the time they leave third grade so they can use these properties to help them when they go into fourth grade doing long multiplication and division.
Good. Discuss the sequence of the lessons that surround this one lesson.
The sequence of the lessons to surround this was to do just a strong foundation of knowing their basic facts, to have a strong foundation of a solid array, how to read an array, how to make an array, and how to take that array and use it in real life situations.
Okay. Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make this lesson reflect the full intent of the standard or cluster?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Talk about the standards or cluster targeted in this lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
Well, the standard is OA5, which is to be able to apply the properties of multiplication, and there are 3 of them. And so this whole lesson was focusing in on one of the properties, which was distributive property. And so I took their skills that they knew in multiplication, and I took what they knew from how to make an array, and since we had a strong foundation of array and how to use the commutative property, I then took their strengths and decided it was time to show them how you can take a array and break it apart. So this is it's an OA5 standard, but it helps to do all the other standards above OA1, OA2, OA3, and OA4, because all of it is basically the understanding of multiplication, the understanding of division, how they go together, which is so important that kids know the relationship between multiplication and division.
How did you Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified, and how did you plan for this?
Well, the core action 1 was a lot of me with the planning and making sure that I knew that this standard, what I really wanted them to understand was that distributive property. And so I looked at what they had learned in second grade, and how can that array help us to learn the third grade arrays and how to get that into the distributive property. I also was bringing back some of their prior knowledge so that I understood maybe some gaps that they might be missing that I needed to fill in before I could start studying and analyzing this property.
Next section of questions. We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your classroom. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Well, the first shift is focus, and I feel like there was a lot of focus on this standard so that the kids had a true understanding and could see that the multiplication and how they broke apart this array. So the focus was on the multiplication and how to use this standard. The coherence of, the coherence is thinking about the grade levels. And I really reflected a lot on what'd you do in second grade way, third grade way, just because that's my abbreviation of how they do it. I spend a lot of time looking back at the second grade standards, just because I want to be familiar with those standards so that I understand what they're coming in knowing and maybe what they may be stronger or weaker in so that I can use that connection. And then the last one is rigor. And this lesson was the understanding of the understanding of how to do the distributive property. Then there's the procedural, which is the steps to get to solve the problem. And then the other thing was the fluency. You saw the 8 minutes fluency of practicing their facts, and that's because it's so important that by the end of third grade that the kids know their facts fluently. And this way, the 8 minutes with kids testing each other, recording their scores, and monitoring themselves, I see a great improvement with their fluency and their basic facts, which is going to help me when I'm teaching any of the OA standards, especially with the distributive property, because if they don't have a strong foundation of their facts, it's very hard to teach the strategies. So I'm hoping by doing a little bit every day of practicing the facts that the children are going to improve with all the areas of multiplication in the standards.
How did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What's the same and what's different?
This is probably what I've learned the most with this lesson. In the past, I've thought a lot about this. In the past, when I did distributive, I basically brought in noodles, and I would say to the boys and girls, okay, well, the numbers in the noodles you add, plus the numbers in the other noodles you add, and then you put it together and you have an answer. And it did work, but I never really, I guess, understood what the distributive property was. I didn't really understand until the Common Core standards came out and I was really analyzing these standards that I learned that the distributive property is breaking an array apart. And if the children know how to break this distributive property apart, how they can take such a big problem like 12 times 8 and make the array and then cut it in half. So for me, it was an eye-opener, is that, wow, I truly understand now what the distributive property is and how it helps kids in math. Not just you do it and you do what's in the noodles and you move the noodles and you add them and you move on. So I think it was more of an eye-opener for me as a teacher, a strong foundation of these are the properties, these are how kids are going to understand it, be able to apply it, be able to use it, and then understand in real world life how we use it every day.
Good. Student engagement. Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensured that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. How did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson, and how do you know?
I do a lot with partnering and grouping, and they sit in groups of 4. And I think watching the kids work together and calling them up and modeling with kids and having them work with their shoulder partners or their face partners and listening to those conversations, I have a pretty good understanding. Being the first lesson, I was just getting to hear and see. I did learn from this lesson that, we still are mixing up the arrays of going down and across at times, but the underlining emphasis of getting the right answer, I think they understood. I could see it by looking and walking around when they were working in partners. I could also see it when they were working on their slates. It also targets me on which tomorrow when I meet with a group, who I need to meet with in a small group, who I need to meet with one-on-one. Today being the first time, it just lets me kind of watch and see who takes this property and can really do it, or who really helps somebody else. But to me, working together in math, whether they're helping each other, being coaches, or they're working together. I think that's the key to success in math is the more they work together, the more actively involved they are, the more these math standards are going to stick with kids and be able to use in their everyday life.
Explain how you differentiated in this lesson. Did all students have opportunities to work on grade level content?
All students in this activity were able to work on the grade level content. Differentiation is key when you don't really know what's happening. And so when the worksheet that the children did, as they were going on, it was getting harder. It was identified by me by looking at the stars that I had put on the paper. But for the boys and girls, they did not know that as they were going through it, it was getting more difficult. I try to keep that differentiation at the very beginning so I can see who might tomorrow maybe be able to handle a larger array than somebody else. But I always like to start out with everyone doing that standard or giving them an opportunity, and then going into the guided math when I see that kids need more extra help, or to see which of the activities today they didn't complete. Because I will collect it, analyze it, look at it, and then kind of lead my direction for how much more of the distributive property can I use, or how can I tie it in maybe with more story problems or word problems as we go on to other areas.
Next part of the question. If all students did not have this opportunity, please explain why. Please explain why. Which behaviors? Okay, well, let's just go with that. If all students did not have this opportunity, explain why.
Every child was given the opportunity. Everybody was participating today, and everybody they like to be the detective in math. They like to find the answers. It seems the more hands-on, the more motivated they are.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? And what actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
Core Action 3, I think the biggest thing that you saw was the kids working together. They were very positive. I work really hard to get kids to respect each other. It takes time to build that community. So I think in Core Action 3, what you saw was kids working together. They were comfortable. They were in a positive environment. They agree to disagree, but they also are not arguing if they both have different answers. And I think that takes time to build that climate in your classroom. I also feel in Core 3, you saw children that were trying to apply it in their everyday life. It's not easy for third graders to figure out how does this math work, and sometimes it doesn't work till they're in the moment in the everyday life where it says, wow, this is how it works in my life. This is the distributive property. So I do think you were starting to see kids use that application for Core Action 3, but I also see you saw an environment where kids were willing to take risks, were willing to ask me questions, where I could be more of the facilitator and not the leader. I could step back after I had given them some guidance and showed them how to use the distributive property.
Would you like to, well, they didn't submit any work. Okay. Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked particularly well and what might you do differently?
I think this lesson was a lot of material. I think the kids used their slates, the kids came up, the kids did a partnering activity. I think if I changed the activity, I might have different bags of pennies where the kids could make their decisions on which bag they wanted to go with. I might change the worksheet just to make it easier for them to follow the directions. Other than to explain it with the yellow slip and the boards, I think that was easy for them to make the connection between the smart board and the board, the activity that they had with the partners. But it always depends on the group you have. And I do think that worksheet, I would go back, I would modify it, and maybe put in some more challenging activities for those children that really picked up how to move the bar and how to break it apart faster. If I had a different group of kids, I might let them break it apart any way they wanted. I was impressed at the end of the lesson when kids came up, they could divide it up everywhere and pretty much came up and knew how to put the parentheses in. So when you think about the parentheses and you think about the breaking it apart and you think about the arrays and you think about everything that we covered today, I feel like they have a good starting understanding of how the distributive property works.
Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
No, I think my student behavior today, coming back right after lunch, is a difficult time. But they were thrilled to show what they do every day. And you know, the cameras in the classroom are not normal for them. So to them, as I told them, it's your time to show all you do every day. So I think overall, I think the kids came in, listened well, and picked up the main components of the lesson that I was trying to teach to them today.
Great. I thought you had 100% participation. All those hands were up.
That one question, was there anything on Core 2 or is it only Core 1, right?
It's just Core Action 3.
And then the beginning one, it was Core Action 1, right? There was nothing on Core Action 2, was there?
That's just which of the core indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies in the very beginning?
Okay, because there was Core Action 2, but that's okay. I don't care.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Can I just talk about
Yeah.
Core Action 2?
Yeah, what
And
would
then
you
I'll
like
go
to
back. I just want to double check. I just think in Core Action 2, the children were given a lot of opportunity to check their work. They were being with the slates. The teacher could get a quick understanding looking at the slates that they understood what the concepts you were to cover. So basically when I saw that they could do it on their slates and I could see that they were doing it with me, I knew they were ready to do it in partners and with groups. I think you have to kind of gauge where your group is at. If I felt like today they weren't going to carry on with giving them the bag of activities to do alone, then I would have probably continued on. But I could tell that with the participation that I had with them coming up, moving the bar, moving the pennies, they were understanding that this array is just breaking it apart.
Great. Thank you.
Is that good?
That was good.